Most women try to be seductive without knowing which type of femininity actually works for them. Or they try copying one single ideal of femininity. But there are 6 powerful feminine seduction archetypes, and each one of these attracts and seduces in a completely different way. And in this video I'm going to explain to you those 6 feminine seduction archetypes, and maybe you can find out your own. And we will start with the first one, which is also the quite most popular one. The Siren. The core energy of the Siren is sensual, irresistible, and sometimes a little bit dangerous. She seduces with her sexual presence, a very feminine appearance, walk, voice, and feminine movement. Robert Greene distinguishes in his book The Art of Seduction 2 subtypes of the Siren: the theatrical Siren and the sensual Siren. The theatrical Siren has the skill of transformation. She can really transform her appearance and appear goddess-like or step into another role. And there is one historical example for a theatrical Siren, and that's Cleopatra. If you have seen my video about Cleopatra and her seduction skills, you might remember that Cleopatra loved to seduce Julius Caesar and Mark Antony with dramatic entrances. She also tried to resemble the goddess Isis, so had a really kind of goddess-like attitude. The sensual Siren also has often this kind of innocence, which is mixed with a lot of sexiness. And a classic example for a sensual Siren is Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn had this childlike innocence, but at the same time she was a real bombshell. And of course, she seduced a lot with her walk, her voice, and her femininity. There is also a contemporary example for a Siren, and that's Monica Bellucci. Monica Bellucci attracts less through words and more through her feminine presence. Her gaze is steady and calm, her movements are rather slow and deliberate, and her voice is soft and low. With regard to the embodiment, both types of the Siren seduce with their feminine presence and with rather slow and deliberate movement. The Siren doesn't chase attention. She creates an atmosphere with her voice, gaze, and movement. Now we come to the second archetype, which I think is also quite common but very different. The Coquette. The core energy of the Coquette is creating desire through withdrawal. And she does that by alternating warmth and distance. She often keeps others emotionally off balance, which creates that those people are trying to get her attention or validation. A classic example would be hot and cold behavior. Does that sound familiar to you? Because to me it does. I think this is a very common pattern of seduction. But the coquettes do it subconsciously. They have it in their essence. And Robert Greene mentions 2 historical examples for coquettes in his book. The first is Elizabeth I, the Queen of England, who used flirtation and refusal for political power. And the second historical example by Robert Greene is Josephine, the wife of Napoleon Bonaparte. It is said that when Josephine and Napoleon were apart, and they were apart quite often because he was on campaigns a lot, he used to write her love letters. And she didn't always reply those letters, and this created a lot of desire and longing in Napoleon because he was never quite sure about her affection. A contemporary example for a coquette is Zendaya. Her attraction comes from emotional distance and unpredictability. She never reveals everything at once and often remains slightly out of reach. So to sum this up, you see that the embodiment of the coquette is creating desire by alternating warmth and closeness with distance and withdrawal. In terms of body language, this could also manifest in a short gaze, turning the body away, making pauses, and slow reactions. The first 2 archetypes are more associated with feminine seduction, while the ones that are coming now can appear in both women and men. And the third archetype is the natural. The core energy of the natural feminine seduction archetype is innocence, playfulness, and authenticity. The natural archetype has often somehow managed to retain their youthful charm and their impulsiveness, and all of this that reminds us of a child. Children are usually very open and non-defensive and receptive. This is very attractive to many people. A historical example for a natural seduction archetype would be Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker was a dancer at the Parisian Revue, and she often danced only dressed in feathers. She was very wild and untamed and had kind of a very natural, free-spirited attitude. And this is how she mesmerized the crowds. Another type of the natural is more of the girl next door type. And here we have as an example Jennifer Lawrence. Her attractiveness and seduction lies in spontaneity, emotional openness, and playfulness. The embodiment of the natural seduction archetype is attracting through lightness and through emotional openness. This feels very warm and approachable and real and not carefully curated, which makes it very seductive. Many women in our daily life might belong to this seduction archetype. But now we come to a completely different seduction archetype, number 4, the star. The core energy of the star is glamour, fantasy, and projection. This archetype seduces by being slightly unreal, allowing others to project their dreams onto her. She sometimes appears elevated, aloof, as if she's belonging to another world. A historical example is Greta Garbo, the actress. Greta Garbo had kind of a mystic and unavailable character, which really fits well to the star. And also another example would be Marlene Dietrich, even though Marlene Dietrich also belongs to another seduction archetype that we will come to later, so stay until the end. But she has also part of the star because of course she really embodied this cinematic glamour and combined with a kind of controlled mystique, very typical for the star. A contemporary example for the star would be Beyoncé. She attracts mainly through image and aura, and not through personal accessibility. The star becomes a symbol rather than a person. So with regard to the embodiment, the star seduces by creating an image and by allowing other people to project their fantasies onto her. And that's why many celebrities fit into this seduction archetype. So far, do you like this video? If yes, please give me a thumbs up because this really helps my channel and motivates me. And if you are not yet subscribed to my channel, I warmly welcome you to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss any upcoming videos. Now we are coming to my favorite feminine seduction archetype, the ideal lover. The core energy of the ideal lover is emotional attunement and romantic mirroring. The ideal lover seduces by embodying the target's deepest unfulfilled desires. She observes, studies, listens, and then subtly reflects what the target is craving and missing the most in their lives. Robert Greene distinguishes two subtypes of the ideal lover: the beauty ideal and the romantic ideal. As an example for the beauty ideal, he mentions Madame de Pompadour, the mistress of Louis XIV, the French king. In the beginning, Madame de Pompadour seduces with her beauty and charm. She wears very beautiful dresses, etc. But she also appeals to all the other senses. For example, she had her room always scented very, very deliciously and also had beautiful objects in her rooms. Also, she took care of her manners. She was never resentful or defensive towards Louis, and she was also able to skillfully discuss upon any subject. The romantic ideal, on the other hand, is more focused on romantic and emotional mirroring. This ideal lover finds out what their target wishes for the most in their lives and provides it on an emotional level. She's also more attuned with the target than most people, who are rather self-absorbed, of course. This is what makes her very, very attractive too. But for this subtype, I only have a male example from history, and that's Casanova. Casanova is like the perfect example for an ideal lover, male version. But I also have a contemporary example. I really think that this woman is the perfect representation of the ideal lover seduction archetype. And I'm talking about Georgina Rodriguez. To my view, she fully embodies emotional attentiveness and devotion. Her allure lies in being emotionally available and loyal. She's also deeply attuned to Ronaldo's emotional and familiar needs. But of course, she also represents all the characteristics of the beauty ideal. So she's kind of a mix of both subtypes and a perfect example for an ideal lover. With regard to the embodiment, you see that the ideal lover seduces less through mystery and more through making the other person feel deeply valued and supported. And why is this my favorite seduction archetype? I would say because this archetype is highly emotional intelligent. For example, Madame de Pompadour, she didn't only appeal to the physical senses and to the physical side of Louis, but she also made him feel greatness in himself. So the ideal lover also appeals to the better self of a person, which I find extremely interesting, also from a psychological point of view. What do you think about that? But before we continue with the 6th feminine seduction archetype, I want to tell you something which is really important. Even though all of this might seem a little bit like manipulation, this has absolutely nothing to do with manipulation. It is about understanding how attraction naturally flows through different personalities. And now, my dear, we come to the last feminine seduction archetype, which is very interesting and unusual, and that's the dandy. In the feminine archetype, the dandy is kind of a mix of feminine and masculine expression. I will explain it to you. So the core energy of this archetype is kind of gender ambiguity, but also aesthetic rebellion. So this archetype seduces by transcending traditional femininity and by borrowing masculine traits and also blending genders to appear kind of self-defined and untouchable, which can be very captivating. Historical examples are Lou Andrea Salome and also Marlene Dietrich, that we have mentioned before. Lou Andrea Salome was independent, free-spirited and literate. She rejected traditional feminine roles in her time, was kind of amoral and sexually autonomous. And she kind of had this strange mix of masculine and feminine. And Marlene Dietrich, on the other hand, played a lot with the masculine element in her clothing. So she expressed that through fashion. Marlene Dietrich was wearing, for example, male clothing and combined them with one specific, very feminine aspect. And this made her very, very attractive. Maybe you know it yourself. Sometimes when we as women are wearing, for example, a tie or a men's shirt, can be very, very attractive. And why is that? That's because of this contradiction. By the way, I also made a video about the masculine element in seduction, and there I'm talking a little bit more about those historical examples. So if you're interested, watch it. I will link it here and also down below so that you can watch it later. And now we continue with a contemporary example. A contemporary example of the dandy archetype could be Tilda Swinton. She attracts through consciously blending masculine and feminine in her expression, in her fashion, in her demeanor. So she plays with this androgynous style very consciously and also has a quite controlled physical presence. But it is important to mention that most of these archetypes are really not so much about gender. Even though I'm talking about feminine seduction archetypes, actually most of them are rather patterns of attraction that can appear in both women and men. So with regard to the embodiment, we can summarize that the dandy attracts and seduces by blending masculine and feminine expression into one very individual presence. Now that you know the 6 seduction archetypes, you might feel instantly drawn to one or another, or maybe to several ones. So now I would like to know which one feels most like you, or which one is your favorite. Let me know down below and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!